Welcome to our channel, your gateway to the most spine-chilling tales and unnerving true stories. Today, we present a harrowing true account, the Haunted Lighthouse, Reckoning. Get ready to be on the edge of your seat as we delve into this unsettling narrative. But be warned, comfort is the last thing you'll find here. The rain pelted down against the window panes of the lighthouse keeper's quarters, creating a rhythmic patter that seemed to echo the distant roar of the sea. Thomas, a young and adventurous lighthouse keeper, sat at his desk, his eyes fixed on a map of the treacherous coastline that surrounded them. He had just arrived at his new post, eager to begin his new life in this remote and beautiful corner of the world. Outside, the wind howled, sending shudders through the walls of the lighthouse. Thomas glanced around the dimly lit room, taking in the old-fashioned furniture and the worn, wooden floorboards. It was a cozy enough space, but he couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding creeping over him. The locals had warned him about the restless spirits that haunted the lighthouse's upper floors, and their stories had left him feeling uneasy. He tried to shake off the superstitious fears, telling himself that he was a modern man, and there was no reason to believe in such nonsense. After all, he had been trained to handle any situation that might arise, ghosts or no ghosts. With a determined nod, he stood up and made his way over to the door, unlocking it and stepping out into the hallway. The hallway was long and narrow, with a winding staircase leading up to the lighthouse's lantern room. The air was thick with the scent of brine and candle wax, and the floorboards creaked beneath his feet as he walked. As he made his way up the stairs, the howling of the wind grew louder, until it seemed to fill every crevice and cranny of the lighthouse. Finally, he reached the top floor, the lantern room itself. The room was dark and empty, save for a single, flickering candle that cast eerie shadows against the walls. The rain battered against the thick glass of the lantern, causing it to rattle and groan. Thomas walked over to the control panel, his hands trembling slightly as he activated the light. The lantern room was bathed in a brilliant white light, illuminating the surrounding coastline for miles around. But even as he marveled at the view, Thomas couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. He turned around, expecting to see one of the lighthouse's keepers, but the room was still empty. It was then that he noticed something else. The door to the lighthouse's attic was slightly ajar. Curiosity getting the better of him, Thomas pushed the door open and stepped inside. The attic was cluttered with all manner of strange artifacts and oddities, much of it left behind by the lighthouse's previous keepers. As he wandered through the maze of old furniture and dusty trinkets, he felt as if he were walking through the lives of the people who had once called this place home. And then, he heard it, a faint whispering, almost like the wind through the trees. He followed the sound, rounding a stack of old crates, and found himself in a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room stood a heavy oak table, upon which rested a dusty, leather-bound book. As he approached the table, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. And then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was the elderly lighthouse keeper, who had shown him around earlier. The old man's eyes were wide with fear, and his lips moved silently as he gestured for Thomas to turn around and leave. Thomas hesitated, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on here?" The old man trembled, his lips quivering as he struggled to find the words. "The spirits," he managed to choke out. "They've been haunting us for years. They won't rest until we set things right." Confused and frightened, Thomas listened as the old man told him the tale of how a fellow keeper, jealous of his position and consumed by greed, had sabotaged the lighthouse's beacon, causing countless ships to crash on the rocks below. The spirits of those lost souls had been trapped within the lighthouse ever since, their restlessness growing with each passing year. The old man's story was so compelling that Thomas found himself believing it, despite his initial disbelief. He knew what he had to do. Together, they would perform a ritual to appease the spirits, setting them free once and for all. As they prepared the ancient tools and lit the candles, Thomas felt a sense of purpose and connection to the lighthouse's long history. When the final words of the ritual were spoken, the room filled with a blinding light. Thomas shielded his eyes as the spirits of the lost souls were finally set free. Their restless spirits set sail toward whatever awaited them beyond the horizon. As the light faded, he turned to the old man, who was now smiling for the first time in years. "Thank you, Thomas," the man said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "You've given us all a chance at peace." Together, they left the attic, closing the door behind them. As Thomas descended the stairs and returned to his quarters, he knew that he had found not only a new home, but a new purpose in life as well. He was now a part of the lighthouse's legacy, bound by blood and spirit to the rocky coastline that surrounded them. And though there would be challenges ahead, he faced them with a renewed sense of courage and determination, knowing that he had the support of the lighthouse's ghostly guardians. Thomas's first order of business upon arriving at the lighthouse was to familiarize himself with its archives. The room was dimly lit by a single lantern, its shadows dancing across the walls lined with dusty tomes and ledgers. He sat down at a sturdy oak table, its surface covered in inkwells, quills, and piles of parchment. The musty scent of old paper and sea salt filled the air. As he began to sort through the documents, he noticed that some of them were marked with strange symbols and runes. Intrigued, he set aside these particular volumes for later examination. He also found the usual records of ship movements and lighthouse maintenance, as well as the logbooks kept by previous keepers. Scanning through the entries, he learned about the lighthouse's long history and the keepers who had tended to it over the years. One particular logbook caught his eye. Its pages were yellowed with age and stained with seawater. The handwriting was illegible, but the front cover bore the name Jacob, the same name as the spirit who had haunted him during the night of his arrival. Curious, Thomas took the logbook with him to his quarters, intending to transcribe the entries later. That night, as he lay awake in bed, he heard distant whispers and footsteps padding across the floor above him. The sound of something heavy being dragged across the stonework sent a shiver down his spine. He tried to convince himself that it was just the wind, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than that. The next day, Thomas made his way to the local inn, hoping to find someone who might be able to shed some light on the history of the lighthouse and the keepers who had served there. The inn was crowded with fishermen and sailors, the air thick with the smell of ale and tobacco smoke. He made his way to the back, where an elderly woman sat at a small table, keeping watch over a pot of stew that simmered on the hearth. "Good afternoon," Thomas said, trying to catch her attention. "I'm the new lighthouse keeper. I was wondering if you might be able to help me." The old woman looked up at him, her eyes clouded with age, but there was still a spark of curiosity in them. "Hey, lad," she said, gesturing for him to sit down. "What is it you want to know?" Thomas explained about his discoveries in the lighthouse archives and the strange occurrences he had experienced the previous night. The woman's expression grew solemn as he spoke, and when he had finished, she leaned in close, lowering her voice to a whisper. "There are those who say that the lighthouse is cursed," she said, "that the spirits of the keepers who died there are not at peace." Thomas listened intently, his heart racing. "Do you know anything about a Jacob?" he asked. "He was the last keeper to die here, before the others left." The old woman nodded. "Ah, Jacob," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. "They say he was a good man, but he made a terrible mistake. He grew careless, and it cost the lives of many sailors." Thomas's blood ran cold. "What happened?" he asked, hardly able to speak. The woman took a deep breath before continuing. "It was during a particularly stormy season," she began. "The fog was so thick that Jacob could barely see his hand in front of his face. He tried to keep the beacon burning, but he was struggling. And then, one night, he heard something on the radio. It was a ship in distress, lost in the fog. Jacob made a decision that cost him his life and damned his soul." "What decision?" Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "He turned off the lighthouse's beacon," the old woman said, her voice trembling. "He guided the ship to safety, but in doing so, he condemned countless others to their deaths. That's why the spirits haunt the lighthouse still. Because they cannot find peace until the truth is known and the wrongs are righted." Thomas sat back in his chair, stunned. He thought about what the woman had said and realized that he now had a better understanding of the situation. It was his duty to ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. "Thank you," he said, standing up. "I appreciate your help." The old woman nodded. "You take care of yourself, lad," she said, "and be careful up there. The lighthouse can be a dangerous place." Thomas left the inn, his mind racing with possibilities. He knew what he had to do. He had to find a way to honor Jacob's sacrifice while also ensuring the safety of the ships that passed by. As he made his way back to the lighthouse, he vowed to do everything in his power to right the wrongs of the past and finally lay Jacob's spirit to rest. Thomas sat in the dusty archives of the lighthouse, poring over ancient records and journals. The musty scent of old parchment filled the air as he skimmed through page after page, searching for any clue that might lead him to the truth about the haunting. As he read, he discovered that the saboteur was not the only person who had died in the lighthouse. There were countless others who had met untimely ends within its walls. His heart heavy with the weight of this knowledge, Thomas decided to seek out the descendant of the saboteur. He knew it would be a difficult task, as the family had long since moved away from the area, but he was determined to find them and uncover the truth. After weeks of searching, he finally located the family's old homestead, now overgrown with ivy and neglect. The door creaked open as he knocked, and an elderly woman with a frail frame and a stoop shuffled out to greet him. Her eyes were rheumy with age, but there was a spark of recognition in them when she saw Thomas. "You must be Thomas," she said, her voice weak but steady. "I've been expecting you." Thomas was taken aback. "You know why I'm here?" The old woman nodded. "My great-grandfather confessed his sins to me on his deathbed. He said that he had been driven mad by the haunting, and that he couldn't take it any longer. He begged me to find someone who could put his soul to rest, but he died a long time ago," Thomas said, hesitantly. "Surely the spirits must have found peace by now." The old woman shook her head. "No, my dear. You see, the spirits are trapped in limbo, unable to move on until their sins are forgiven. They are bound to this place, forever reliving their torment." Thomas' heart ached for the poor souls. He knew he had to help them. After speaking with the old woman for hours, he learned about a centuries-old ritual that could be performed to cleanse the lighthouse and set the spirits free. The ritual required the participation of the descendants of both the saboteur and the lighthouse keeper, who had originally uncovered the betrayal. With the old woman's blessing, Thomas set out to find the descendant of the lighthouse keeper. It was a difficult task, as the lighthouse keeper had no known surviving family, but Thomas persevered. Eventually, he tracked down a distant cousin who had inherited the keeper's journals and possessions. The cousin was initially skeptical of Thomas' story, but as he heard the tale, his eyes filled with understanding. "I knew my ancestor was not a saint," he said, "but I never imagined. Yes, I will help you. Whatever it takes to set those poor souls free." Thomas was overjoyed. With the help of the descendant of the saboteur and the descendant of the lighthouse keeper, he prepared for the ritual. They gathered at the base of the lighthouse on a clear, moonlit night, the spirits of the past watching them from the shadows. Thomas took a deep breath and began to speak the ancient words of the cleansing ritual. As he did so, a sense of peace settled over the group, and they felt the weight of the past begin to lift. The ritual took several hours, but finally, it reached its conclusion. The spirits of the lighthouse keeper and the saboteur appeared before them, their features no longer distorted by anger or fear. They bowed their heads in gratitude as Thomas offered them his forgiveness. With the spirits finally at peace, Thomas felt a sense of closure himself. He had fulfilled his duty as the lighthouse keeper, and now it was time to move on. He said goodbye to the descendants of the lighthouse keeper and the saboteur, promising to keep their secret safe. As he turned to leave, he glanced back one last time, feeling a sense of warmth and belonging wash over him. The lighthouse, once a place of fear and despair, was now a sanctuary for the lost souls who had wandered its halls for far too long. Outside, the wind picked up, and the lighthouse's beacon lit up the night sky. It was a symbol of hope and resilience, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the enduring bond of family. Thomas smiled, knowing that the spirits of the lighthouse were finally at peace, and that their story would live on in the hearts and minds of those who had been touched by it. As he walked away, he vowed to continue his search for other lost souls, determined to bring them the peace and comfort that had been granted to the spirits of the lighthouse. And so, the legend of the haunted lighthouse faded into memory, replaced by the tale of a young man who had found redemption in the unlikeliest of places, and who had brought light back into the world. The storm had finally subsided, leaving behind a serene and ethereal calm. The sky was a canvas of pastel hues, the sun painting a warm, golden glow over the horizon. The ocean, once a tumultuous beast, now lapped gently against the jagged rocks below. The lighthouse, long the symbol of safety and guidance, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief as it stood tall and proud, its beacon shining brighter than ever before. Thomas, the lighthouse keeper, stepped out of the lighthouse, taking in the breathtaking view. He had been through much in the past few days, confronting the restless spirits that had haunted the lighthouse for decades. He had uncovered the truth behind their torment and, with the help of the local historian and priest, had found a way to set them free. Now, as he gathered the necessary items for the ritual, a sacred book of lore and a vial of holy water, he felt a mixture of trepidation and determination. He knew that this ritual would not only free the spirits, but also restore the lighthouse's reputation and ensure that it would continue to guide ships safely home for many years to come. The local priest, Father O'Malley, arrived at the base of the lighthouse, his robes billowing in the gentle breeze. He was a man of great wisdom and kindness, and Thomas was grateful for his guidance and support. Together, they began the ritual, their voices rising in unison as they chanted ancient words and sprinkled holy water upon the lighthouse's walls. As they continued, the air around them seemed to shimmer and shimmer, as if reality itself was warping. The lighthouse began to glow with an otherworldly light, and the spirits of the former keepers could be seen gathering at its base, their translucent forms shimmering in the ethereal glow. The spirits, once so full of anger and despair, now appeared to be at peace, their torment finally lifted. As the final words of the ritual echoed through the air, the lighthouse erupted in a blinding light. The spirits vanished into the ether, their souls finally set free. Thomas and Father O'Malley looked on, tears streaming down their faces, as the lighthouse's beacon shone brighter than ever before. The local townspeople, who had gathered at the base of the lighthouse to witness the event, broke into spontaneous applause. They cheered for Thomas, their once stricken hero, and for Father O'Malley, who had guided them through this difficult time. As the cheers died down, there was a sense of renewal and hope in the air. Thomas, his heart filled with a deep sense of accomplishment and satisfaction, climbed the winding steps to the top of the lighthouse. There, he stood before the massive Fresnel lens, watching as the first rays of sunlight danced across its prisms. He knew that, from this day forward, the lighthouse would continue to guide ships safely home, free from the shackles of the past. As he descended the stairs, he noticed a small, worn book lying on the floor. It was the same book he had found in the archives, the one that had led him to the truth. He picked it up gently, feeling a sense of reverence wash over him. The book, he knew, would remain a testament to the power of forgiveness and the importance of setting things right. In the days and weeks that followed, Thomas settled back into his routine as lighthouse keeper. The townspeople, once wary of him, had grown to accept and even respect him. They spoke of him in hushed tones, telling stories of his bravery and his unwavering dedication to the truth. And as the years passed, the legend of Thomas the Lighthouse Keeper grew ever larger, his name etched forever into the annals of history. But Thomas knew that it was not his name that mattered. It was the lives he had saved, the spirits he had set free, and the peace he had brought to the lighthouse and the town. And as he stood on the balcony of his home, gazing out at the ocean, he felt a deep sense of contentment wash over him, knowing that his place in the world was exactly where it belonged. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting its warm, golden light upon the small island, the birds sang cheerfully in the trees. A light breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the salty scent of the ocean. It was a peaceful morning, one that seemed almost idyllic after the turmoil of the past few weeks. Thomas, the lighthouse keeper, stood atop the tower, taking in the breathtaking view. He smiled to himself, feeling a sense of accomplishment and relief wash over him. The celebration the night before had been a resounding success. The entire village had turned out to honor him, showering him with praise and gratitude. They had prepared a feast, with food enough to feed an army. There had been songs and dancing, and even a toast to Thomas, the man who had saved their beloved lighthouse and the countless lives that depended on it. It had been a night he would never forget. Now, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the lighthouse's windows, Thomas felt ready to face the world. He knew that he still had much work to do, but for the first time in a long time, he felt hopeful. He descended the spiral staircase, making his way to the ground floor where the celebration had taken place the night before. The remnants of the feast were still spread out upon the tables, the food now cold and congealed. A few stragglers remained, drinking and reminiscing about the events that had transpired. Thomas approached the village elder, who had been a fixture at the celebration. "Elder," he began, "I would like to speak to the entire village. Is there a place where everyone can gather?" The elder smiled warmly and nodded. "Of course, Thomas. You should use the meeting hall. It's just behind the church." Thomas thanked the elder and made his way to the meeting hall. It was a modest building, constructed of rough-hewn timber and topped with a thatched roof. As he entered, he saw that every seat was filled, the villagers sitting in rapt attention. He took a deep breath, steadying his nerves, and began to speak. "My friends," he said, his voice carrying easily through the hall, "I would like to thank you all for being here today. Your support and encouragement have meant the world to me. But I also want to share with you what I have learned during my time here. You see, the lighthouse is not just a symbol of guidance and protection. It is also a reminder of the importance of forgiveness and redemption." He went on to tell them of the spirits that had haunted the lighthouse, and how they had been driven mad by the loss of their loved ones and the weight of their guilt. He spoke of the ritual he had performed, and how it had allowed them to find peace. He told them of the sacrifice that had been made, not only by the saboteur's descendant but also by himself, and he urged them to remember that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. As he spoke, the villagers sat in rapt attention, their faces a mix of wonder and sadness. Some wept openly, others clasped their hands together in prayer. When he had finished, there was a moment of silence, broken only by the sound of soft sniffling. Then, one by one, they began to rise from their seats, clapping and cheering. They surrounded Thomas, slapping him on the back and thanking him for what he had done. But Thomas shook his head. "No," he said, "this was not my doing alone. It was a team effort. We all worked together to see this through. And it is my hope that we can continue to work together in the future to make this world a better place." The villagers smiled at his words, and Thomas knew that he had said all that he needed to. He took one last look around the room, taking in the faces of the people he had come to care for so deeply. And as the celebration continued, he knew that a new chapter in their lives was beginning, one filled with hope, redemption, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Months have passed since Thomas successfully banished the vengeful spirits haunting the lighthouse, and he now finds himself settled into a comfortable routine as the keeper. The lighthouse's beacon continues to guide ships safely home, and Thomas takes pride in knowing that he played a part in bringing peace to the area. The days are long and quiet, filled with the rhythm of maintaining the lighthouse and the occasional visit from the local historian. As they sit together in the cozy study, the historian regales Thomas with tales of the area's rich history and folklore. It is during one such visit that Thomas notices the historian eyeing him curiously. "Is there something you'd like to ask, sir?" Thomas inquires, pouring them both a cup of tea. The historian hesitates for a moment before responding. "I've been meaning to show you something, Thomas. There's a hidden room in the lighthouse's basement that I believe you should see." Thomas's curiosity piqued. He follows the historian down a narrow flight of stairs and through a concealed paneling. The room beyond is unlike anything he's seen before. It is filled with ancient artifacts and scrolls, their faded ink still legible despite the dust that covers them. "These items have been passed down through generations of my family," the historian explains. "They belong to the original lighthouse keepers, and contain knowledge about the lighthouse and its secrets." As Thomas explores the room, he feels a sense of awe and responsibility wash over him. The artifacts are not just historical relics. They are tangible links to the past and the keepers who came before him. He spends hours poring over the scrolls, trying to decipher their meaning and understand the secrets they contain. One particular scroll catches his eye. It is covered in intricate symbols and appears to be a map of the surrounding area. As he studies it more closely, he realizes that it contains information about a long-lost underwater cave system near the shore. The cave system, according to the map, leads to a hidden chamber where the original builders of the lighthouse hid a treasure. Thomas shares his discovery with the historian, who is visibly excited. "It is said that the treasure contains a powerful artifact," he says, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "An artifact that could grant the holder control over the sea itself." The thought of such a powerful artifact in the hands of someone who might use it for evil is too much for Thomas to bear. He decides that he must find the treasure and ensure that it is used for the greater good. The historian agrees to help him, and together they begin planning their expedition to the underwater cave. The journey is treacherous, and they must navigate their way through dark, cold waters filled with dangerous creatures. Eventually, they find the entrance to the cave system, hidden beneath a waterfall. As they venture deeper, they come across an underwater chamber with a massive, ancient door. The historian recognizes the symbols engraved on the door and proclaims that this is the place they have been searching for. Thomas takes a deep breath and pushes the door open, revealing a chamber filled with glittering treasure. At the center of the room rests a glowing orb, the artifact they've been searching for. They carefully retrieve the artifact and make their way back to the surface. Once they are safely on shore, they examine the artifact more closely. It appears to be made of a translucent, iridescent stone, and emanates a calming energy. The historian reveals that the artifact, called the Eye of the Sea, was created by the original builders of the lighthouse to protect the coast from harm. It can be used to summon a school of dolphins to guide ships safely to shore, or to calm the waters during a storm. With the Eye of the Sea in their possession, Thomas and the historian feel a new sense of purpose and responsibility. They know that they must use its power wisely, ensuring that the coast remains safe and the memory of those who perished at sea is never forgotten. As they stand together atop the lighthouse, gazing out over the ocean, they feel a profound connection to the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of the lighthouse keepers watch over them, their work finally complete. Thomas' heart raced as he carefully unfolded the yellowed parchment, revealing the ancient script etched into the pages of the hidden diary. The ink was faded, but he could still make out the words of the original lighthouse keeper, detailing his encounters with a powerful and mysterious being known as the Watcher of the Waves. As he began to read, he learned that the Watcher had granted the lighthouse its power, but at a terrible cost. It demanded a constant sacrifice to maintain the beacon's strength. Over the centuries, the sacrifices had become less frequent, and the Watcher's anger had grown. The lighthouse had been spared its wrath thus far, but Thomas knew that peace could not last. Shivering, he continued to read, his eyes darting over the delicate script. The Watcher was not a benevolent entity, but rather a capricious and vengeful force of nature. It watched over the waves from its dark lair deep beneath the ocean, and demanded that a life be given to it every full moon. In exchange, it would ensure that the lighthouse's beacon shone brighter than any other, guiding ships safely home. As he read further, Thomas discovered that the Watcher had granted the original lighthouse keeper a choice. He could either sacrifice one of his own crew members, or condemn the lighthouse to eternal darkness. The keeper had chosen the former, and over the years, the cycle of sacrifice had continued. But as time went on, the keepers began to grow weary of the burden they bore, and the sacrifices became less frequent. Thomas' heart sank as he realized the gravity of the situation. He knew that the lighthouse's newfound peace was fragile, and that the Watcher's wrath was building. If something wasn't done to restore the balance, the consequences would be dire. He set the diary aside, his mind racing with possibilities. He knew that he had to find a way to appease the Watcher, to restore the sacrifices and protect the lighthouse from its wrath. But how? He thought back to the stories he'd heard from the local historian, hoping that some hint or clue might be found within them. Days turned into weeks as Thomas pored over ancient scrolls and texts, searching for answers. He consulted with the local priest, who knew of the Watcher from legends passed down through the generations. Together, they began to formulate a plan. Finally, on the eve of the next full moon, Thomas and the priest prepared to make their way to the hidden chamber deep beneath the lighthouse, where they believed the Watcher's lair lay hidden. They gathered candles, incense, and a sacrificial animal, readying themselves for what they both knew would be a perilous journey. As they descended into the darkness, the air grew colder and damper, and the sound of the waves grew louder. Their torches cast flickering shadows against the walls, revealing ancient carvings of creatures that could not possibly exist in the natural world. At last, they arrived at a massive stone door, carved with symbols that seemed to writhe and shift before their eyes. With trembling hands, Thomas placed the sacrificial animal atop the stone altar, its eyes wide with fear. The priest began to chant in a language long forgotten by mankind, the words echoing through the chamber. As he continued, the stone door began to groan and creak, slowly opening to reveal a pool of inky black water. Shining their torches into the depths, they saw a figure rising from the water, its features obscured by shadow. It stood taller than any mortal man, its form shrouded in robes that seemed to shift and billow in the currents of the water. Its eyes glowed like twin stars, fixed on Thomas and the priest. The figure spoke, its voice deep and booming, filling the chamber with power and menace. It demanded that they prove their loyalty, their willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. Thomas took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that there was only one way to earn the Watcher's favor. Stepping forward, he drew his knife, raising it above the sacrificial animal. The priest watched on, his face pale and drawn, but he said nothing to stop him. With a shaking hand, Thomas brought the knife down, ending the animal's life. Blood spilled onto the stone floor, forming a pool that reflected the flickering light of their torches. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the figure in the water lowered itself back down into the pool, and the stone door began to close, sealing them back inside the chamber. As the last of the light faded, Thomas and the priest felt a strange sensation, as if a great weight had been lifted from their shoulders. The air grew warmer, and the light from the lighthouse seemed brighter than ever before. They climbed back up through the darkness, their hearts filled with both dread and determination. Thomas knew that their task was not yet finished, but for now, they had bought the lighthouse some precious time. He vowed to find a way to end the cycle of sacrifice once and for all, to free himself and the others from the burden they had borne for so long. As they emerged back into the world, the first rays of dawn were just beginning to paint the sky, heralding a new day and a new beginning. But Thomas knew that the shadow of the Watcher would always loom large, and that the price of protection would always be high. Thomas' journey to appease the Watcher of the Waves begins with a sense of determination and purpose. He first travels to the ruins of a long-lost civilization, where he finds an ancient scroll, written in a language he does not recognize. Undeterred, he spends months studying the script, slowly unraveling the cryptic words and uncovering the secrets of the Watcher. He then journeys to the depths of the ocean, exploring sunken ships and underwater cities, searching for artifacts and relics that may help him in his quest. It is here that he discovers the remains of an ancient ritual site, hidden beneath the waves. After careful excavation, he uncovers a hidden chamber containing a massive, glowing gemstone. He realizes that this gemstone is the key to communicating with the Watcher. With the gemstone in hand, Thomas travels to the top of a forbidden mountain, said to be the Watcher's domain. The climb is treacherous, and he nearly loses his life several times, but his determination keeps him going. As he reaches the summit, he cleanses himself in a natural hot spring, preparing for the final confrontation. Finally, he approaches the Watcher, revealing the gemstone and offering his life in exchange for peace. The Watcher, impressed by Thomas' selflessness and dedication, agrees to the bargain. It imbues Thomas with its power, granting him the ability to control the elements and harness the lighthouse's energy. As Thomas accepts the Watcher's gift, he also pledges to use his newfound abilities to protect the innocent and ensure that the lighthouse continues to be a beacon of hope and safety for all who sail the seas. With the Watcher's blessing, Thomas returns to the lighthouse, ready to face whatever challenges may come. The people of the village welcome him back with open arms, grateful for his bravery and sacrifice. They begin to see Thomas as more than just the lighthouse keeper. He is now their hero, their protector, and their friend. Over the years, Thomas continues to honor the Watcher's trust, using his powers wisely and selflessly. The lighthouse remains a symbol of hope and safety, and the surrounding waters become known as the safe haven, a place where ships can find refuge from the dangers of the open sea. Thomas' legend grows, and people from all over the world come to hear his stories and learn from his wisdom. As the years pass, Thomas grows old and weary, but he knows that his work is not yet done. He takes solace in the knowledge that he has brought peace to the lighthouse and the surrounding waters, and that his sacrifice has not been in vain. His final days are spent surrounded by friends and admirers, telling stories of his adventures and imparting the lessons he has learned to a new generation of listeners. When Thomas finally passes away, the people of the village gather at the lighthouse to say their final goodbyes. They light a great bonfire on the beach, sending his spirit soaring up into the heavens, where it joins the Watcher of the Waves, watching over them all, forever. The lighthouse continues to shine brightly, a testament to Thomas' enduring legacy and the power of selflessness and courage. Thank you so much for joining me on this cinematic journey. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Have you experienced a spine-chilling horror that left you trembling? Share your terrifying tale with us by emailing nightmarenetwork@hotmail.com, and we'd be thrilled to feature it on our platform. Until next time, happy movie watching.